week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
The new D&D 3D VTT, does it have a name?
It's been released publicly that Wizards uses code names to refer to their projects.
Frames, you get backdrops for D&D Beyond, digital dice, you get 2 weeks early access. That's right, this is the #1 video game podcast in all the realms.
This is all conspiracy cubes, everybody. Okay, but we already expect this to be paid. Why am I paying to be able to access a dragon fight with a cool mini on the platform that is selling me on cool dragon fights with cool minis? That's what concerns me.
So, are wyverns 2-legged dragons or are they winged Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Well, let's also remember that they don't have arms.
Well, are their wings their arms?
Well, their arms are their wings.
No, they're wings. This isn't what I want to argue about
Dactyl
today.
means fingers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We can get into all the taxonomy of the damn thing.
Let us know in the
parlance.
comments.
All that and more right now.
Professional.
For once in my life, I did it in one.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms. That's right. This is the podcast you come to when you want the cutting news, the cutting commentary of the RPG industry. If this podcast was a class, it would probably be the fighter or the wizard or something with a high satisfaction score. Definitely not the ranger. My name's Ben Byrne. I am joined this week, as always, got a classic crew together. Shawn Merwin, James Hake, Dael Kingsmill. Dael, I have to ask, what player species is your favorite? What do you feel like you connect with the best?
I feel like my answers are so run-of-the-mill boring. I love humans and I love half-elves. I'm so I don't know. It's so one of them, the half-elves, is just that classic, slightly Mary Sue-ish, I'm playing a fantasy game and this is just a fun thing that makes my brain go, ooh. There's no reason beyond that. I just am I'm a half-elf, and there's something really fun in saying that. But I also feel like some of, if not most of, my favorite characters I've ever played have been humans, and I don't know, there's something I enjoy about the fantasy of being a human in this kind of a fantasy world. And I particularly I feel like there's something that feels like it drags the fantasy closer to my ideal when I play as a human.
I have got to go with the Genasi for this one. I love an elemental theming. I love the way that people can kind of slide the high fantasiness from one end to the other, whether or not, maybe you have some sort of earthen cracks upon your skin or your whole head is on fire the whole time. There's a lot of versatility and presentation for them. And I grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Forever, it was the halfling. And I just like the roguiness and the earthiness of them. But then when 4th edition hit, something changed. And the gnome was demoted from a player-facing species to a monster. And they even came out with a video with the gnome going, I'm a monster. Look that up someday if you haven't seen that. It is Wizards laughing at itself, and it is brilliant. And since then, I've just connected. I hate gnomes, and my self-loathing really connects with that. I see them as filthy, not too bright, just out in the forest, not knowing what's going on, and totally unaware of their surroundings, yet somehow still being in touch with that.
Yeah.
And that really speaks to me. So I'm now my favorite species is the gnome.
I have to go with Dampier, to nobody's surprise, which I feel like, as Dael was talking about half-elf, I feel like Dampier is the gothic half-elf of just, emo kid, the world sucks, nobody understands me, kind of connection to that player species, which we've recently introduced officially to Grimhollow as something that you can play, which we will talk about a little bit later in the episode. But before we get there, let us dive into the bit of news this week. We've got a couple of sort of tidbits here. First of all, starting with our best wishes from the Lorecast to Sam Riegel, who came out recently with a video talking about a diagnosis that they were recovering from. Dael, do you want to, what was the...
No, basically released a video statement just saying the story he told was basically that he noticed he wasn't tasting sweet things, and when it turned out to not be COVID, he went to the doctor and followed through on the whole thing, and it ended up being basically a type of tonsil cancer. And he had to have his tonsils and part of his tongue and part of his soft palate surgically removed, which for someone who is kind of the internet's ideal of a bard, who is known for quicksilver tongue wittiness, that's a really scary and brave thing to do. And he basically made this statement to say that it is a preventable kind of cancer. It comes from the HPV virus, the human papilloma virus, and it is something that you can get vaccinated for. I'm vaccinated for it. There's a program, at least in Australian schools, where you get free vaccinations when you're sort of around 12, 13. It is highly recommended that you go and you get the vaccine, because it helps prevent 6 different types of cancer, I believe, that all grow from this human papilloma virus. So that was kind of the main message. But the other message was pay attention to your body and what it's doing, because it would be really, really easy to ignore something like, oh, food doesn't taste as sweet anymore. But it's really important that you go and catch these things early, which is also why it's important that all countries strive for universal Medicare.
And I want to add on to this that not only by getting vaccinated against HPV are you doing yourself a service, but HPV is an STI. And so, you will be doing certain people who you know intimately a service as well by making sure that you're protected against that.
We've got Michael in chat who's, by the way, changed their name to Michael in chat. I appreciate that. Does mention, unfortunately, many of us were too old for HPV vaccine. That's a good thing to bring up, actually. I think it's ages up to 40 or 45. It is recommended that there is still sort of efficacy to the vaccination. So really consider getting it. If you're under 25, it's particularly helpful. But, just look into it, see if it's right for you, but probably right for you. Also, just want to throw out there, fun fact, the vaccine was initially developed at the University of Queensland. Woo!
Ooh, yeah, that is a fun fact.
Aussie.
Oi, oi, oi. Best wishes to Sam on a speedy recovery, and, appreciation, I suppose, as well from the community for him choosing to share that story and choosing to spread that awareness about the vaccine, which we wanted to help as well. Moving on to some other news, some tabletop RPG news. This one's a little bit rumory, but it's an interesting one. Is the new D&D 3D VTT, does it have a name? Possibly. Let me tell you a story. This is from a recent Screen Rant interview with Josh Herman, who's head of art at Wizards of the Coast, and was talking about the redesign of the dragons, including what was referenced as the author of the article on Screen Rant, the Sigil Gold Dragon Mini, which will be available when Sigil enters closed beta later this year, strongly hinting that Sigil may be the name of the 3D VTT.
Ben, are you trolling us?
No. I'm absolutely serious. This is potentially the name.
It's a significant event, you're saying?
Well, yeah, there is going to be the debate. Is it Sigil or Sigil all over again? Christian Hoffer from the comicbook.com, which is where I originally learned of this and then went through to the Screen Rant article, does point out that Sigil was used as a code name for the VTT in previous job listings. So this may not be the final name, but I like it a lot more than the D&D 3D VTT. That's a little bit of a mouthful, whereas Sigil's kind of like, it's got a real Fantasy Grounds, Foundry, Roll20 vibe to it. What do you use? Oh, I use Sigil.
So it's funny that you say that, because we've known for years, it's been released publicly, that Wizards uses code names to refer to their projects. Generally, they're pretty good about it, but sometimes they end up connecting the code name to the project that the code name refers to, such as in this case where they're talking about the closed beta of Sigil. Well, what else is in closed beta except the VTT? And you put a job listing up about working in the VTT and calling it Sigil. You've just told the world that the code name for this project is Sigil.
Yeah.
Does it matter? Not really. They've done a better job in the past of talking about projects using the code name, but not letting on what that code name meant. But that's more for books and other physical digital products, not this complete other thing. So I think there is a fairly good chance that the code name for this is Sigil. And we don't know what they're going to call it yet, with the caveat that often I've liked the code names for their products more than the actual name for their products in the long run. So there you go. Maybe it will be called Sigil, and maybe we will love it.
Even publicly, they tend to use code names for things ahead of the, like, if we think of things like D&D Next and One D&D as ultimately code names, they do have kind of a pattern of, we'll call it this for the entire development run, and then we will change it.
I think they would be fools not to simply call their virtual tabletop like D&D Beyond Purple or something like that. So Disney Plus it.
Oh yeah, D&D Beyond Plus, D&D Beyond. Yeah, okay.
D&D Beyond.
Beyonder.
Beyond D&D Beyond.
Very on board.
BDDB.
Yeah.
To infinity and beyond. Oh no, wait, we don't want to invoke the wrath.
This is one step beyond D&D Beyond.
We should be doing their ads. We're geniuses. I want to talk about, this is buried in the middle of this, so I don't know whether you were about to move on to it or move on away from it, but I won't let you do that to me, Benjamin.
No, that's all right. They've taken control. They've been gone for a week, yeah. It's clear who's driving now.
There's this little reference in there to the Digital Gold Dragon Mini as a pre-order bonus for the 2024 core rules as part of the 3D virtual tabletop. And that, to me, is a little ping of like, oh, what's that about? Because there's a little part of me, this is all conspiracy cubes, everybody. Okay, because if you get the Gold Dragon Mini as a pre-order bonus, it seems to me that implies that otherwise you would have to pay for the Gold Dragon Mini. And if you have to pay for the Gold Dragon Mini, that to me sort of seems like it implies that you have to pay for the minis for the virtual tabletop. And to me, that becomes an interesting, like, little flag, because if the whole point and the selling point of this virtual tabletop versus other virtual tabletops is, look, it's this fancy 3D virtual tabletop. It's fancy. It's got this kind of video game quality. Look at all the fancy minis and things. But then you have to buy the minis separately. That would, to me, be a bad thing.
I think it depends for me where the 3D VTT sits in their product line, right? Because they've talked about in the past, I believe this is the case. Full disclosure, I often forget about what we talk about on this podcast immediately after recording it. So, but I remember talking about the 3D VTT in the past, seeing how high fidelity it was when, like, 12 months ago, they showed off like that trailer as part of the D&D update video thing that went for 20 minutes. There was the joke about wood. I remember that. And thinking, like, what sort of PC will you need to run this thing, right? And then not long after that, a couple of months later, Maps got announced and it kind of popped up and we were all surprised and we were like, Maps? That's not 3D, but it seems so easy to use. It's much closer to like an owlbear rodeo sort of thing. So I can see that being, I'd have to think about it a bit more to really decide how I feel about it. But I can see it being like the Maps is kind of your free D&D Beyond, as far as I know, it's still free, D&D Beyond kind of thing that you can use. And the 3D VTT is kind of your premium product, probably for people who have a PC to be able to run it in the first place, right?
Yeah, I'm also seeing a lot of people in chat saying similar things, and I feel like I should clarify my statements. I'm not surprised that the 3D VTT would have sort of this premium element to it or microtransactions to it. What concerns me is the idea that potentially this already maybe subscription-based platform, we don't know yet, we're in the conspiracy cube zone, all right, people. Sure. An already potentially paid platform to distinguish it as the premium option versus the Maps version would then have further transactions required for, if you want to combat with a cool gold dragon, you got to pay a little bit more. If it was, for example, a specific variation of the mini, like, but if you want your gold dragon to look like this or be in this cool pose, and that was a page difference in microtransaction, then I don't really care about that stuff. For me, I think microtransactions in the context of like mobile games are particularly scummy, but for a thing like this, it's also kind of, as long as we're in the zone of like fun kind of variation skins and visuals. I think microtransactions are just a way for platforms to stay alive. But it's kind of those areas where I'm like, okay, but we already expect this to be paid. Why am I paying to be able to access a dragon fight with a cool mini on the platform that is selling me on cool dragon fights with cool minis? That's what concerns me, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I went to clarify, but I'm not sure that I actually did.
No, I mean, it's an interesting intersection, right, between miniature tabletop, not wargaming, but that's kind of the ultimate culmination of miniature tabletop games, right, is the 30 minis aside, 100 minis aside kind of wargaming, down to I use coins for D&D combat because it's cheaper than buying minis. And so my miniature buying side of my brain is like, I wouldn't mind paying for miniatures that much on a VTT because I already pay for miniatures, and in the wargaming space, the extremely high quality miniatures can be quite expensive. You want to see a contrast between wargamers and D&D players was when they brought out those $25, I don't know how much they were in US dollars, but they were pretty cheap on sprue, single, here's a wizard, here's a beholder. I think it was WizKids who did this. And in a D&D Facebook group I was in, all the D&D players were like, this is a ripoff. $25 for one mini? I can't believe that. I wouldn't pay that. And all the wargamers were like, and you get extra pieces too? This is a bargain. I can't believe this, I could get a miniature for $25. So there's that context, but then there's also the video game side context, which this kind of is as well. And I agree, it muddies the waters a little bit if they're charging, let's say $60, $70, which is the cost of a AAA video game. Maybe it won't be that much. We don't know what their monetization is going to be on the 3D VTT. So like you said,
whether it'll be separate from D&D Beyond, whether it'll be attached to the D Beyond subscription, all these things. We are in the conspiracy cube zone.
Yeah, but it's I think you had a very keen eye on a detail there, because I hadn't necessarily thought, oh yeah, if it is a pre-order bonus, how do you get it normally? Will they sell packs maybe? Here's a dragon pack of miniatures. Here's a whatever. The one thing I'm a little bit funny on is the fact that it's a gold dragon for pre-order, because talk about a dragon you're not likely to fight if you're a D&D party, right?
That's
a red
true.
dragon, you don't need the miniature if you're not going to fight it, in theory.
I'll fight a gold dragon. I'll fight any dragon.
Gold or green, apparently.
Yeah, screw the law.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a good guy.
So have we decided that it's a damned if they do, damned if they don't? If they treat it like it's a video game that you would normally pay $60 for, people will complain that you have to pay $60 for it. If it's not free, people will be mad. If it's better than Roll20, but people will still compare it to Roll20 or Foundry or any other virtual tabletop, is that where we're at?
It's going to be fascinating to see for sure how folks react.
So that's a yes.
But on the video game side of things, right, it also depends on how predatory you want those microtransactions to be, because mobile game microtransactions can be extremely predatory, whether it's you're blind buying, like a group of things and you don't know exactly what you're getting, or the game stops you from playing unless you buy a certain amount of things, or, whatever it is. There's, psychologists that work for Silicon Valley companies to figure out how to get people to invest more in these microtransaction style things. And famously, 5-6 years ago, a Star Wars game released that got massive blowback.
I was just going to say.
Because it charged $60 up front, or maybe even $70. I can't remember how much it was. It would have had its own premium editions and all that sort of jazz going on with it. And then there were these blind box kind of purchases inside that, to be able to get those by playing the game, you needed to sink an ungodly, virtually impossible amount of hours into. And so it's kind of like, if there's an upfront cost, that makes microtransactions harder to digest, but it depends on what that upfront cost is.
It is also worth mentioning that the pushback against Star Wars Battlefront 2 was very successful, because the argument was made that it was essentially gambling in a game that kids will be interested in, and Disney, as the parent company for Star Wars now, didn't want that association, right? And similarly, I suspect Hasbro wouldn't want that kind of association. So that kind of extreme end of the predatory microtransactions, probably we are sort of insulated from, just because I don't think Hasbro would watch that happen and then be like, yes, we will try the same trick. But I don't know. It's
or so we hope.
I mean,
so we hope.
Star Wars Battlefront 2 changed the gaming industry in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because games were increasingly going into that sort of business model. Overwatch was kind of famous for it beforehand. And then Star Wars was almost like it was the 1 foot too far that brought everything else back from the edge. And I don't think we're in a utopia now by any stretch,
No. But we've been stopped from falling into that particular kingdom of hell.
yeah, exactly. We may as well jump into this topic. Speaking of a video game like pre-ordering style business models, the D&D 2024 books are up for pre-order at the moment with kind of 3 tiers of pre-order bundles, if you will. If you're in Australia, I don't believe you can pre-order the 2024 core rules from the D&D Beyond website. You need to go to like wizards.store. something.
Oh.
Someone in the chat help me out if you know exactly where to go. But yeah, you can't pre-order the physicals, I don't believe, through the D&D Beyond website if you're outside the US. There is the digital player's handbook for $30 or $29.99, which comes with a few digital kind of goodies along with it. And you get the digital PHB, which I'm assuming will be through D&D Beyond. The digital and physical player's handbook, which is $79.98 USD. You get a physical book sent to you. You get the digital access through D&D Beyond, as well as some extra goodies. Digital and physical core bundle, which is $179.97 for all 3 books, the Monster Grimoire, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Player's Handbook, and all 3 digital and physical. You get them sent to you with a whole bunch of digital extras, including the Gold Dragon for the VTT. You get frames, you get backdrops for D&D Beyond, you get digital dice, lots of different digital dice depending on what tier you go for. You get 2 weeks early access. That's right, this is the #1 video game podcast in all the realms. Feel like I'm on the Bombcast suddenly.
Look, it's
Cool.
I just have nothing to say, you know?
It happened.
It is news.
Yeah, buy it if you want it. Don't buy it if you don't want it. That's
it. Feel free to wait and see if you want to wait and see. The pre-order system has its place in the world, but also you don't feel beholden to pre-ordering a product that you haven't gotten to see yet.
Generally, I think pre-ordering is great if you're trying to support an indie product, something you think genuinely needs, cash up front, something that you want to see more stores carry rather than simply, going to a band camp or what have you. We want to show that there's demand. If you're trying to buy something from a big company, you don't need to show them there's demand. They'll be fine.
Cool. And then wrapped into that is the dragon design update. We got to see more dragons. Yeah, love dragons.
This I'm excited about. Let's talk about how cool dragons look.
Let's talk about the new black dragon, which I think looks sick. And I love I love that they're leaning into the lore of the black dragon, which when I read it in the 5th edition monster manual, I loved this idea that as they get older, the acid in their face just kind of like dissolves parts of their face. It becomes more skull-like, and the art really reflects that now. It's cool.
I love the serpentine hooded green dragons. When Wyverns in 2014 had that Cobra hood, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And judging by some art that we've also seen, Wyverns now have a sort of like Tyrannosaur look to them, which is cool in its own way. They're a little bizarre because we also have actual Tyrannosaurs and don't worry about it.
Are Wyverns 2-legged dragons or are they winged Tyrannosaurus Rex?
Ooh, we leave that to the philosophers.
Well,
How many
also
Wyverns can
remember
dance
that
on
they
the
don't
head
have
of a pin? Yes.
True. Well, are their wings their arms?
Well, their arms are their wings.
Okay,
yeah.
Maybe they're just so small you can't see them.
Are a bat's wings arms?
Yes,
no, they're wings.
Because they have fingers.
I'm so glad I threw this hand grenade in there.
This isn't what I want to argue about
dactyl
today.
means fingers,
Yeah. We can get into all the taxonomy of the damn thing. In reasonable
Let us know
parlance,
in the comments.
any layperson would look at them and go, those are wings.
I just got too esoteric for Dael. I win.
Everybody comment bats equals arms or bats equals wings in the comments, one or the other. Let us know. You can do it on
What side
Spotify
of the
too.
wall will you choose? This is like a Marvel marketing campaign.
Hashtag team hands.
The one
Hashtag team fingies.
Bats equals fingies.
There's a dinosaur. I don't remember which one. Maybe the Pachycephalosaurus that has a poison tip thumb claw. I really want that to be like, instead of having a scorpion stinger, now they're getting sort of dinosaur wyverns, and it is wyvern. It's cognate with viper. Wyvern.
Okay, right. I believe you.
I want them for their thumb claws to be poisonous.
That's a cool idea. I had a wyvern that could also spit acid that I painted. I put some like green goo on its tail to like the acid or the poisons dripping off it, and I had it dripping out the mouth as well. It was a great miniature. It's on my Instagram if you want to go check it out. And the party never fought it. They just went in a different direction.
That's
Never
so
saw the tabletop.
Sad.
It is.
That's so sad.
These things happen.
You have to have it be the barkeep at the next tavern they go to.
Yeah, the barkeep is the wyvern.
Yeah. Here's
where I thought that was going.
Here's the barkeep. Yeah.
Wyvern with a headband of intellect, you know?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Trashley Who in chat just called me out and said you've left reasonable parlance when you say reasonable parlance. Oh no. I freaking love the green and black dragon designs. I love them so much. This serpentine, the concept art is so good. And it follows the same kind of pattern. I will say the brass dragon design, I don't like as much as the old one. That's just me. That's just my personal taste of the thing. But I also wonder how much of it is just that the art that we've seen for the brass dragon design is so different to the art that we've seen for the black and green dragon designs. And I just really like that sort of, I love a concept art sort of phase of design.
Sure.
So I don't know. I wonder how much of that is just me being like, oh, but I want to see the side-on picture of the head blowing his breath weapon. You know what I mean? But that's my take.
I'm definitely more ambivalent on the brass dragon, which is a shame because I love the lore of the brass dragon. I've featured it in one of my campaigns because I love this idea that they're conversationalists. They're incredibly social. They love talking to people and learning about the world. But because they're a dragon and they don't really understand, like mortals are almost playthings to them, they will chase you down and force you to talk with them if you decide to try to run away. They will bury you in sand up to your neck and then have a wonderful tea time chat with you about the world and the things that you've seen. And I think that that's A, incredibly fun as a GM to roleplay, and B, I think engaging as a party as you... Well, it's not evil. It's not trying to kill us, but we don't really want to hang out here. What do we do about this thing?
That's the awkward guess.
It's a little bit Narnia.
That's a little bit
vibes.
evil. Yeah.
I got to say, the only dragon design that I'm not a fan of so far is the copper one. And I think it's just an issue I have with that artist's style. It's just a stylistic disconnect for me. Copper dragon has this really long, spindly neck and then a really big bulbous head. And I don't care for it. It's very whimsical, which is appropriate for a copper dragon, and so I'll give it that. But it does not seem to exist in the same world as the other dragons, and so that doesn't clear for me. Sure. But then I look at the little chromatic dragon wormlings, the little tykes running around its feet, and I'm like, oh, this is a style thing. I think I want to see, like Dael, I want to see the concept art for this guy before I go passing any judgment on the design.
Yeah, it is kind of a little... I've just Googled it now because I hadn't seen the copper one. We're talking about the art piece where it's got all the other dragons running around kind of its feet and its neck passes towards the top of the frame. Yeah, I agree. It does look a little awkward.
Am I the only one who looks at the art and just thinks of rules and what players are going to try to do? The dragon flies away. Well, its tail is so long that technically I should be able to grapple it even though its body is 40 feet away.
Didn't we have a shocking reveal with you not that long ago, Shawn, where we found out that you just straight up do not think about or care about the art?
If you've listened to me for more than 10 minutes, yes, you know this already.
Even though you did represent artists on your Mount Rushmore of D&D last week.
It's true.
I did. It's a gift to you all.
Mad respect.
I am magnanimous.
Appreciating something that thou cannot appreciate thyself. That is... I thought a similar thing with the green dragon. I think the way that its tail wraps around the tree trunks near it looks really sick and really evocative. But immediately I thought, if this thing tries to fly away, it is up creek because it is tied to that tree functionally until it gets its tail untangled.
I feel like, I don't know. I trust an anaconda to be able to unwind itself better than I personally could unwind it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. But an anaconda, like I think about how an anaconda moves.
I trust an anaconda. I just stop there, and that's it. I trust an anaconda.
I mean, I know we're talking about fantasy creatures here, but anacondas don't have wings, and they're not particularly
sure.
Fast,
but what I'm saying is, I think that a green dragon, assuming that this is how it operates, how it lives in its environment, I think that it knows what it can and can't do with its tail and be able to fly away.
Yeah, that's
better than you, Benjamin.
Look, I don't know anything about green dragon tails. So, and if anybody says I do, they're lying. Don't trust them. They're not, especially if it's an anaconda.
Wow. The anaconda distrust is so real.
It goes back to a conversation that I was having with Emily Hare, who did the art for Surviving Strange Hollow, which James and Dael both wrote amazing stories for. And I have not told them that yet, but they have. So she was talking about what she does, and I was telling her what designers do. And I basically said, if you create something in the art that is noticeable, that is abnormal from an expectation, we designers sort of have an obligation to use that. So when I see a tail that's 40 feet long, that's got to be more than a tail slap. That's got to be something more than a little piece of lore. That needs to be used in the game. I hope they do. I hope seeing this art, they're able to do that and work into that. Otherwise, there is a disconnect between the art and the game and the stories that flow from both.
I would like to see more differentiation between the dragon types. It's nice to see that a little bit more in the art. Not that the previous dragon types weren't differentiated in the art, but they definitely all had very similar structure, whereas now they seem a bit more unique from each other.
Yeah.
And I'm a proponent, I've talked about it before, as the green dragon, the brass dragon, as opposed to having species of these things. But it would be nice to see a little bit more in the mechanics to be differentiated.
What's the most memorable dragon that we've seen in the last 2 years?
Drogon?
Oh, you people are letting me down. The most noticeable, famous, laughably hilarious dragon that we've seen in the last 2 years.
Oh, the big roly-poly dragon from the D&D movie?
Oh.
That's it.
Yes, roly-poly.
Why is that noticeable? Because how different it is from anything you would have imagined.
It impacts the encounter.
Wow, chat had your back instantly, Shawn. We let you down.
Thank
you.
Are you smarter than your Twitch chat? No.
Look, speaking of dragons, just very quickly, and spoiler free, House of the Dragon, they still know how to do dragons in combat, and it looks sick. Just saying, if you want inspiration for your dragon D&D campaign, go watch that latest episode.
I would love to see more of a unity between, because it's been a complaint of mine in the past that you get in the monster manual kind of, here's the art, and then here's a description of what this creature is like that's all just narrative and ooh, cool. Isn't this a cool creature that you want to use in your game? And then a stat block. And none of the three really seem to connect to each other in any strong way. And I would love to see that unity come around. Sure. So all eyes on the dragon tail being a rappily.
There's something that really strikes me about all this art, by the way.
Yeah.
It's all for the player's handbook. All the art posts coming from the artist say, da-da-da-da-da-da, dragon, from the player's handbook.
Wait, that's wild.
So we're getting full art for every single type of metallic and chromatic dragon in the 2024 player's handbook. These are not monster manual previews. These are not Dungeon Master's Guide previews. What are they doing there?
They're saving that for the real sick art. Yeah.
I'm so curious. Is it filler art? Is there some kind of relationship here? Because they're not going to be throwing this art next to your Way of Four Elements monk. Sorry, Warrior of the Four Elements monk. What will this art pair with?
Maybe. in the adventuring section?
Because these RPs are huge. They're like full pagers.
That's a fair point. I hadn't noticed that they were specifying where those art pieces had come from.
Good point.
Huh. Speaking of and good point, Roll20 sent emails to their user base letting them know, and this is really just a public service announcement. On June 29th, there was unauthorized access to an administrative account for Roll20 for 1 hour, which gave access to an unauthorized party who had access to first and last name of the user base, email addresses, IP addresses or last known IP addresses, and the last 4 digits of your credit card if you're on Roll20. Sorry, that sounded a bit more scaremongering than I intended it to. That is what may have been leaked from a Roll20 data leak. What has not been exposed, they are assuring everybody, is password information, full payment information if you have stored payment, and addresses and credit card numbers. So it's kind of, I got that email a couple of days ago. I didn't think anything of it, to be honest, because another week, another data leak. Am I right? Especially if you're living in Australia.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when there was the first big data breach with Roll20 and everyone was really shaken about it. I feel like there have been several since then that have just gotten progressively less attention.
Yeah, I think my security software had a data leak, if that makes sense. It's like, at this point, who doesn't have my information? And if you did break into my account in Roll20, could you teach me how to use it?
Sorry, this is completely separate from the point, but D&D Beyond's marketplace is now selling physical Magic the Gathering cards?
Huh.
What is this?
Huh?
Breaking news coming in from James Hake.
There's a fresh tweet off of Wizards of the Coast accounts. They're selling folios of 2024 character sheets. They're selling the making of the original D&D book. There's a bunch of physical items being sold, including limited edition foil art, a pack of 5 Secret Lair cards from Julie Bell. The foil editions are already out of stock, but they're selling creature and NPC cards from the Gale Force 9 series. I didn't know that there was a physical marketplace on D&D Beyond. Is this new?
It is. The Magic the Gathering cards, definitely. They have been selling actually, now I might need to double check myself. As we mentioned earlier with the pre-orders, you can purchase, and I believe this has been true for their last few books, but don't quote me on it. You can pre-order like physical digital bundles where they send you a physical copy of Tales from the Infinite Staircase, and you get the D&D Beyond version as well. That's been going for a while, but them selling Magic cards out of the D&D Beyond marketplace is definitely new and different. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, brand consolidation. What are Magic cards doing on the D&D site?
This is what happens when we get breaking news, folks. We don't know what to do with it.
What this? Yeah.
Well, when I look at the marketplace, all I see is the Grim Hollow player pack.
Hey,
it's the first thing on the list. So,
speaking of high quality products, just wanted to give a quick shout out.
Here's a second less smooth segue.
Well, I just wanted to give a quick shout out before we move on, because we are starting to run out of time in this episode. The Ennie nominations were announced on EN World this week for the Ennie Awards happening at Gen Con. I'm not going to read out the full nomination list. Congratulations if you've been nominated. But 2 shout outs I wanted to give. First was to blogger, friend of the show, and host of the second best tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, Teos Abadea. Alpha Stream Game Design blog has been nominated for Best Online Content. So all the best, Teos, in that. Definitely deserving. And also Little Game Masters by Randall Hampton, who is a friend of the show, is nominated for Best Family Game / Product. And it is a cool, like if you've got young kids that you're trying to introduce to D&D, but maybe 5e is a little too much, particularly for younger kids, Little Game Masters is a great product for that as well. Congratulations to all the nominees. We look forward to seeing you at Gen Con, where I'll be and Shawn will be, and other announcements TBD. But definitely come find us at Gen Con. We've got a Ghostfire booth. We'll be there. We're running a Grim Hollow adventure throughout the entirety of the convention. I believe it is all sold out for the time being. I don't know if you can do wait lists at Gen Con.
Everything's always sold out at Gen Con in the D&D area that Baldman Games runs.
Sure.
But if you show up, they will try to get you into a game, be it our game or a learn to play game or some other game.
I'm super excited to be there running an adventure that I wrote at the start of the year. Shawn has since kind of given it a pass over, team effort on that one. And I'm excited to be running it again in a different context as well. See what's been added, see how it will pan out with a different audience. We've also got an epic on the Sunday, a Grim Hollow epic, a major event from the Grim Hollow timeline is going to be played in that epic. I don't want to give away exactly what that event is, but come in expecting something major from the Grim Hollow timeline in that event. And we're also on the Thursday, 11 a.m., Shawn and I will be with Joe Rasso on a production process, RPG publication design panel, where we'll be talking about the production process of making RPG products. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you just want to hear some folks speak about RPGs, come check that out. Look, if you just see me at Gen Con, feel free to shout at me and then wave. You know, I'll be walking around undoubtedly. So looking forward to that.
We'll workshop something for you to shout.
Yeah. It'll be Baba Booey. Actually, no. If you shout either bats equals fingers or bats equals wings.
Yeah.
That will definitely get my attention. Speaking of things that got my attention this week, because I made a video on it, and you can go check it out on the Ghostfire Gaming YouTube channel, is the heritage system coming to Grim Hollow. Well, for the second time, actually, because it was also in Valakan Clans, but it's a little bit different this time. Shawn, do you want to take this one?
No, I don't want to, but I will. the
Always enthusiastic.
The heritage system, I'm just honest. The heritage system began with the Aurora project, where we wanted to divest any game mechanics from actual species for story reasons, for lore reasons. And it turned out to work pretty well. I worked on it. Scott Gray did most of the work on it, but I consulted with him. And so we put it out for Aurora, and it seemed to work fairly well. People who liked that sort of portability and fine-tuning of characters really enjoyed it. So we have iterated on it through a couple of projects, and now we are bringing it full-time to Grim Hollow. What this does is it allows you to express yourself and your character in a nuanced way, so you can build, as the game master, your own campaign with your own very specific types of species or heritages. You can totally use it just like 5th edition D&D to say a dwarf is this and give them all the typical aspects they would have. Or you can mix and match and do some fun things with it. It will also include new species, including the Wolven, the Dhampir, the Accursed, and the Arisen. So these are new Grim Hollow species that we're creating just for Grim Hollow Transformed. I love that. I just saw that today. We're also reimagining existing Grim Hollow species like the Disembodied and the Vexilkind. And it's there for you to playtest starting right this second.
Indeed.
You can go to a link that will be, as Ben would say, here, and you can start playtesting it yourself and let us know what you think.
I'm in love with this system. I really love it. I think it provides such, as you were saying, Shawn, varied, nuanced forms of self-expression when you are expressing the idea of species or heritage or your background, your upbringing within your D&D character. It's so customizable, and yet it also provides, as you said, the traditional traits which allow, if you're the type of group who are like an elf's an elf and a dwarf's a dwarf and they should have these traits that somewhat define them, you can play it that way. But you can also decide, like, okay, so we've got 8 choices in all that we can make for our heritages. You have to have at least 4 traditional heritage traits and then 4 that you can choose from anywhere. The system doesn't prescribe that, but you could go that route if you kind of want that feeling of uniqueness among the species and yet some customizability, or as you touched on with the Accursed, is kind of our new player species that was inspired by the campaign I'm currently running, actually, where we had a character who wanted to play a Kenku fundamentally, but Kenku as a species, canonically, they can exist in your version of Etheros. Canonically, we haven't put them in Etheros before. But I said, what if he was some sort of mysterious creature, and we decided that they had hatched from a petrified basilisk egg under a blood moon, and nobody knew why that happened. Da, 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 da. I have no idea what you're singing. And so the Accursed is kind of the option where you are some form of unique creature with an eldritch origin that allows you to really customize your heritage from a bunch of, whatever options you want to. So yeah, I love the system. James, you had a little bit of experience with this with Valika, where it was kind of changed for the clan affiliation system.
Well, I think that Shawn is actually best equipped to talk about that. I didn't interact with it too highly, but as long as you've come to me, I'll say that I think it's really cool how we've seen such an explosion of innovation when it comes to the question of fantasy peoples in D&D adjacent fantasy games the past couple of years, whether it's how Tales of the Valiant does it, how Daggart does it, how Grimhollow's 5e stuff does it, how Aurora did it differently than the modern incarnation of the heritage system. I just think it's really cool that we can support all of those different ways of doing it.
The Ghost Fire heritage system, if you will, it's appeared in Aurora, it's appeared in Valika, it's also appeared in Ethereal Expanse setting guide. And what I love about those is it's different in each of those contexts as is appropriate for each of those settings. So there's going to be traits in Grimhollow, traits from the Wexelkin, the Disembodied, the Dreamer that haven't appeared before in the Ethereal Expanse or Aurora, but there are also traits that aren't going to carry over to Grimhollow because those were unique to the Ethereal Expanse or those were unique to Aurora. So it's a great system for being able to create a sense of setting as well. Especially I'm thinking of the Astral Merfolk and my much beloved Astral Emergent, two incredibly evocative species from Ethereal Expanse. If you want to play test it, go check the links. Shawn said it before, but I'll throw them back up there. You can sign up for $1 to access the playtest ahead of our Kickstarter that's coming in October. That $1 gets you access to all playtests, including the Monster Hunter from earlier in the year, and we have one more coming before the Kickstarter launches for you to let us know what you think of these new systems that we're developing. Shawn, what's your favorite Grimhollow heritage? Doesn't have to be from the playtest; it can be any of them.
The Wexelkind is so hard to not to love. The story behind it, the what you can do with it mechanically, but also as a story. A player in my home campaign plays one, and he's a Vermin Lord Ranger,
right?
And so he has just a bunch of vermin in his chest cavity, and he opens it, and they pour out and attack, and then they all run back in when they're done. And it's just you could do things like that, and it's so creepy and fun and different from anything that you find in most other campaigns.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Wexelkin's probably one of, if not my favorite as well, especially because it's a Fey flavored heritage that I hadn't seen anywhere else. You know, it's not a lot of Fey heritages can get to this place of elfier than elf, which I think is all right, but kind of has diminishing returns the elfier you get. It's kind of you get there's elf to tree, and there's an evolutionary trait in between. But I think the Wexelkin, though they are often constructed of wood, kind of diverts that expectation with a Fey flavor to it that doesn't necessarily feel like it's trying to out elf.
And by the way, the 4E Wilden was the tree.
Right, there you go. Cool. Well, speaking of trees and listener questions, Shawn, because you're never asked, what's the email address?
Oh, I don't remember. Wait, I know. podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
That's right. That's where you send an email.
Clowning on us.
If you want to send an email, if you were a listener in an episode and you wanted to send in an email, Ben did, who listened on last week's episode. And Ben wants to know, in as concise, as few words as possible, and as concisely as possible, what is the core fantasy of the Ranger? What is the thing that a player should expect to experience? And I'm not necessarily talking mechanically here, at least not initially, more so from a like, what do I want to play? What is the core fantasy of a Ranger?
I want to be not concise, but the concise version of it is a master of the wilds. And I have chosen those words carefully. I did not say a friend of the wilds. Sorry, I can feel it getting into my tone. we're just gonna rest it there and let the others speak.
You can elaborate a little bit. Like, what do you mean?
Will.
Like, what are the? Okay, all right. James Hake, what about?
I would call the Ranger a master explorer.
Okay, that is similar, but definitely I think different. Just taking those words as they are.
Rangers are a subclass of fighter who are adept at woodcraft, tracking, scouting, and infiltration and spying. I take directly from the
scout element, yeah.
From the AD&D Ranger, first edition.
Okay,
that's the first sentence under the Ranger.
Okay, you know, and this, I don't know, I might expose a bugbear of mine, but I might not. Allow me to elaborate. The one thing I'm not hearing in here, which I hear a lot of people say should be the Ranger's core fantasy, is Monster Hunter. He's like someone who specializes at hunting monsters.
Well, I feel like that falls under the umbrella of mine.
I don't. Look, I'm not going to disagree with you on your own definition necessarily, but I will say that I agree with all of those definitions, really. I'm not sure I agree that Ranger necessarily should be a fighter subclass, but, we can get into that. But I think that when I think of quintessential Ranger, and this is the thing, is how many quintessential Rangers do we have in fiction to draw upon? But I think of Aragorn.
Well, okay, but right? Is that not what subclasses are for, right? We go, okay, what's the broad thing that combines all of these different, like archetypes of Ranger? Like, we've looked at Aragorn, we look at, I don't know, what's his face? The one that you always like. Who's the guy from The Witcher?
No, but I don't think Geralt's a Ranger. Because Geralt's not an explorer.
That's a you problem. But I feel like we look at all these characters who we could call Rangers, and we go, okay, well, what's the broad strokes of what makes them have, like, what do they have in common? And then you can, like, drill down and you have your subclasses. Otherwise, what's the point of having subclasses?
But this is, I think you've touched on the exact thing, and I'm going to talk about Geralt, who I have some knowledge of. Geralt can survive on the road between towns, but he's not an explorer. He's not a ranger.
Okay,
like Aragorn
real quick.
is, right?
I know that I know, but Chad is right, and they should have a voice in this, and that's me because I'm cranky. But you said that for you, a ranger is a monster hunter. And then
I
Geralt,
said the opposite.
That's what your first thing was. Your first definition was, you said it's interesting that no one said monster hunter.
Yeah, but I did not say that the ranger is a monster hunter. I don't think the ranger is a monster hunter. So
what's your definition of a ranger then?
An explorer and a master of the wilds. I agree with those definitions. But that's what I'm saying, is that Monster Hunter seems to get in there, but I don't know where that's coming from, right? In terms of like close expectation of the
Here's
Ranger.
Where it's coming from. The first thing it gives in AD&D under the Ranger is when fighting humanoid types of the Giant class, which includes gnolls, goblins, hobgoblins, orcs, ogre mage, trolls, etc. You get +5 to your damage for based on your level. So if you're 10th level, +10 to the damage each time you hit with a melee weapon for those types of creatures.
I love that you talk in mechanics, Shawn.
Oh, I know.
You know where else it comes from, real quick, is from the history of mythology in the Western world. So when we talk about the wilds, right, you get this distinction throughout Greek mythology of, okay, well, there's civilization and there's the wilds. And the wilds is where the monsters are. And the monsters encroach on civilization. And that filters through blah, 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 blah. And eventually you get this character archetype who is the person who represents civilization standing against the encroachment of the wilds. And I think that's where you get that level of like, master of the wilds, but that incorporates this person who is there to push back the monsters.
Okay.
I'm shocked no one has mentioned Dritz Doerden yet.
I don't know jack about that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about
the guy
Dritz.
who wields 2 scimitars and has an animal companion. Even though none of those things are particularly...
animal companion?
His panther, Guinevere.
He has a panther?
Yeah.
I need to know more about
it's a figurine of wondrous power. Right? Dritz Doerden is this bizarre sort of like, I don't know, it's like a spike of rock through the geological record that just crunches into the ranger class that has altered it beyond recognition in many ways from what we're talking about to cool nature guy who dual wields scimitars and has a pet.
I mean, that's who I think of is Drizzt and Aragorn, right? Like those are the quintessential rangers that D&D would or should be drawing.
And as R.A. Salvatore tells the story, he had to come up with that whole spiel in like 30 seconds on the phone as the editor is waiting, about to go into a meeting to pitch his book. And they're like, okay, we want to focus on this drow elf. Could you tell us about it? And Bob Salvatore's like, okay, so he's a ranger and he dual wields scimitars, and he's like making this up in 30 seconds before the editor goes to pitch it. So if that's our standard, then everything that has come since that we think about as a ranger was done in 30 seconds or less to try to pitch a novel.
Sure.
Love that. This is like hearing the origin of the pitch for Kingdom Hearts.
I would believe that. I really like what you said before, Dael, in terms of, going back to mythology and having rangers represent the wilds where the monsters are. But I will ask, and Michael in chat pointed this out earlier, is Beowulf a ranger? Is Heracles a ranger? Bellerophon a ranger? Because these are the archetypal heroes from Norse and Greek mythology that are known for slaying monsters.
Well, if I was going to look, we can get into fuzzy sets if we want to, but you're not going to enjoy the conversation.
Anyway, the broader point being, as I was listening to last week, and I think you all had very salient points, I think that the new Ranger, as they've designed it, if I was to just have a quick personal take, is Hunter's Mark should not be a spell and should instead be just a class feature of when you hit a creature, you can mark it so that you get certain, benefits from having hit it in combat, and therefore you've got the scent of it almost. You don't need concentration on it, and then it's not competing with all your other class features. But I felt like, even in the chat, like it wasn't even in the Lorecast itself, reading through the chat, in which, FYI, we had 280 comments on last week's episode of the Lorecast, which is like 140 more than we usually do. It seems to me like the core fantasy of a ranger is really... nobody necessarily agrees on what
messy.
It is.
It's messy.
It's incredibly messy, which is like, how do you design around that if it can't be defined? And if it's borrowing so much from the fighter, from the...
And how much of it versus, I feel like a lot of early classes, fighter, cleric, thief even, you've got this kind of mechanical basis for what is the core fantasy. The fighter, you fight the things, you do the fighting. The cleric, your core thing, you heal. The thief, you do the traps and stuff. Like there is a very mechanical sort of practice-based core fantasy to them. Whereas I do wonder how many, and I think the warlock falls into this trap as well of like, okay, but the core fantasy has become not tied to mechanism. And so you end up with this weird thing of like, of course, everyone's going to have a different definition of what a ranger is or what a warlock is versus a fighter or a sorcerer. And that, I mean, look, I like it. I love wallowing in that mess. I love going to battle for what my definition is, but I can understand how we will never reach a reasonable resolution in that zone. I like that while you were away, we had this rager and all these comments.
We invited everyone to the party at our parents' house, so they were away on vacation.
And a fight broke out.
We wrecked the place.
Well, speaking of last week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, you can go check that out if you haven't gotten enough of us yet, because
I want to show all of my notes real quick. That's how many I wrote many notes about the Ranger, so I held back.
No, that's all right. Maybe we do a special Ranger episode.
We
one
don't
day.
need to.
I wouldn't call it special, but sure.
The one thing I was surprised y'all didn't talk about, which I don't blame you because they didn't really talk about it, was the crafting rules for 2024. That's what I want to see. I want to see, give me them crafting rules.
Even just some guidelines would be nice. And like a time frame for crafting things that isn't like it takes a year, because there's a lot of that in the 2014 version. There are some good third-party crafting rules, I will say, like I'm from Appalachia. Grimhollow's got the salvage rules. I know the Dungeon Dudes also design new rules for Monsters of Drakkenheim, which is currently post-Kickstarter in its development stage. So I'd just be curious to see if they provide, like for simple things, like they said, like potions, scrolls, that sort of thing. I think it would be fun for certain class. That's why I love actually the, now I'm just rambling, honestly. That's why I love the Plague Doctor wizard subclass that Grimhollow has, is because it's basically someone who can just pop out potions for the party to be able to consume, throughout the adventure and feel like that kind of alchemist type character. Catch us around. We're on Twitch, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific on a Monday. If you're in Australia, it is Tuesday, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you're somewhere else in the world, good luck to you. And good luck to us all. We're all on YouTube here, and you can give the thumbs up and you can leave the comments. Bats equals fingers, bats equals wings. We want to know. Let us know your opinion now in the most divisive. I need another holiday. I've been Ben Byrne here with Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill, James Hake, and we will see you all next week for another exciting, epic, explosive episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. Explosive.
Oh, it will be. I'll bring up the Ranger if nothing else comes up. Thanks, friends.
Bye.
See you next time.